In 1946, a little book called Man's Search for Meaning appeared in Vienna. No author's name, no photograph, just a story, raw, aching, and unbearably human. The man who wrote it had survived the Nazi concentration camp, but he did not wanted the world to know his name, not yet. He said the book was more about survival than him. It was about all of us, about the question that can save your life when everything else is taken away. Why live? Today we'll be exploring his journey not just as history, not just as psychology, but as something deeply personal. Welcome to your channel, Kanha or Kahaniya, where every tale finds a voice. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing everything you once held dear could be taken away. Your home, your family, even your freedom. This was Viktor Frankl's reality in concentration camps. And yet, even there, he discovered something extraordinary. Life can always have meaning, even in suffering. The first half of the book takes us inside Frankl's own life, his experiences as a prisoner in the concentration camps during World War II. We see through his eyes the fear, the hunger, the loss, and the tiny sparks of hope that kept him going. In the second half of the book, the story shifts to inside. Here, Frankl shares his psychological theory called Logotherapy, showing us how to find meaning in life, even in suffering. How finding meaning can help us endure what seems unbearable, which is not just a theory, it's lived experience transformed into a guide for all of us. Before the camps, Frankl was a promising young psychiatrist in Vienna. He spent his days helping people navigating the struggles of life, like depression, anxiety, and obviously the meaning of life. He had a wife, Tylee, a family he loved, and a promising career. Then in 1942, everything was torn away. Viktor, his wife Tilly, his parents, and his younger brother were deported to Auschwitz. The journey itself was a nightmare, packed into cattle cars with barely any air, food, or water. Days blurred into endless, fearful uncertainty. As soon as they arrived, orders were shouted, and the families were torn apart. Prisoners were stripped of everything, their clothes, their possessions, even their names. Each prisoner was tattooed with a number, reduced to a statistic. The dignity, identity, and the sense of self were gone in an instant. Frankl describes the first selection as the most terrifying one. He recalls standing in a line with hundreds of others as officers decided, in mere minutes, who would live and who would die. Young, old, strong, weak, all were separated by a casual wave of hand. The randomness and cruelty were staggering. Frankl quotes, "It is very difficult for an outsider to grasp how very little value was placed on human life in the camp. The list was the only thing that mattered. A man counted only because he had a prison number. One literally became a number, dead or alive. That was unimportant. The life of a number was completely irrelevant. What stood behind that number and that life mattered even less. The fate, the history, the name of the man." After the initial shock of arrival, life in Auschwitz settled into a relentless daily struggle. Prisoners were stripped of their identities and given only rags as uniform. They slept in beds constructed in tiers, crowded together, huddled for warmth. The close quarters offered no comfort, just the constant reminder of confinement and vulnerability. Frankl says, "While we were waiting for the shower, our nakedness was brought home to us. We really had nothing now except our bare bodies, even minus hair. All we possessed, literally, was our naked existence." Almost everyone entertained the thought of suicide, if only briefly. On his first evening in the camp, Frankl made a personal promise to himself. He would not run into the wire. This was the grin term used for touching electrically charged barbed wire fence, the most common method of suicide in the camp. Frankl learned quickly the formula for surviving another day. Shave, stand, and walk smartly. Act composed, and then perhaps you would not be led to the gas chamber. In this moment of sheer horror, Frankl realized something profound. Survival would not only depend upon physical strength or endurance in the concentration camp. The mind, the attitude towards life, the inner choice to hold on. These things would become the determining parameters deciding who would live longer. Within a few days, prisoners passed from the initial shock phase to a phase of relative apathy, a kind of emotional death, feelings dulled, eyes no longer averted. Boundless longing for home and family still burned inside, but outwardly, prisoners appeared unmoved, observing suffering with a detached numbness. As he says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. As weeks turned into months, Viktor Frankl observed patterns in the minds and spirits of prisoners. Life in Auschwitz wasn't just a test of the body, it was the test of the inner self. Despite the enforced physical and mental primitiveness, spiritual life could still deepen. Those who had been sensitive, intellectual, or spiritually rich suffered physically, but their inner selves remained remarkably intact. Love, too, revealed its enduring power. Frankl noticed that it went far beyond the physical presence of a beloved. Even if someone was absent or had passed away, the deep connection to their inner being gave prisoners strength and purpose. Art, music, and humor became small but precious weapons in the fight to survive. Even in the midst of despair, prisoners laughed, sang, and cried together. A song, a poem, a joke, or satire about camp life provided them fleeting escape. Frankl remembered one morning, while everyone sipped a watery soup, one of the prisoners climbed onto a tub and sang an Italian song. The melody brought joy, and the singer was rewarded with an extra cup of soup, which was a tiny, luminous moment in the darkness for all. Humor also appeared, though in the briefest forms. Faint traces that lasted only seconds or minutes, but even those moments reminded them of their human spirit. Even small comforts brought unexpected contentment to the sick prisoners. The prisoners who were sick got excused from work, would lie in their corners, dozing, waiting for the daily bread and watery soup. They huddled together for warmth, too exhausted to move unnecessarily. Yet despite everything, there were moments of happiness, fleeting as they were. The shrill whistles and shouts from the night shift, returning to roll call, were constant reminders of reality. But at least for a few precious minutes, they could simply exist, resting, surviving, and cherishing small joys, as rightly quoted by Frankl. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Through all of this, Frankl observed a profound truth that even in the harshest suffering, the human spirit could find a meaning. Spiritual depth, love, laughter, and even fleeting happiness became anchors, mental lifelines that allowed prisoners to endure, adapt, and survive. He says, when we are no longer able to change the situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. When the war ended, the camp gates stood open. The guards had vanished. Slowly, the prisoners stepped beyond the barbed wire that had held them captive for so long. They walked into the meadows full of flowers, through quiet villages under an open sky, and yet there was no rush of joy on their faces. For years, they had whispered the word freedom, but now it felt distant, almost hollow. The colors of the world were before them, but their hearts could not yet reach them. They would have to relearn how to feel. It was a strange state, called depersonalization, as if everything around them was unreal, part of a dream from which they might still wake. Too many lives, too many dark years, they had dreamt of liberation, only to be jolted awake by the shrill whistle for a roll call. Now the dream had come true, but believing it was another matter. Thin, hollow-eyed, and moving like shadows, they began the slow, uncertain journey back to life, step by step relearning what it meant to be human, knowing nothing would ever be same again. The crowning experience of all for the homecoming man is the wonderful feeling that after all he has suffered, there's nothing he need fear anymore except his God. Even in the darkest hours of Auschwitz, Frankl held on to something precious, his manuscript. When he was forced to strip off all his belongings, his book was taken away from him. Yet as he struggled through typhus and exhaustion, he refused to let it die. On scraps of paper he could find, he scribbled whatever he remembered of it, keeping the words alive. And in doing so, he kept himself alive. The book became more than words on paper. It became a lifeline, a reason to survive, a spark of meaning amidst the unimaginable suffering. On the first day of his return to Vienna in August 1945, Frankl learned that his pregnant wife had died of sickness or starvation in another concentration camp. Sadly, his parents and brother had all died in the camps. Overcoming his losses and inevitable depression, he remained in Vienna to resume his career as a psychiatrist. From his experiences, Frankl developed logotherapy, the idea that the search for meaning is the primary human drive. Logotherapy is a form of psychotherapy that focuses on helping people find meaning and purpose in life, even in the face of suffering, hardship, or unavoidable pain. He explained that the meaning of life could be discovered in three distinct ways. First, through work or creation by dedicating yourself to something meaningful, whether it's building, creating, inventing, or contributing to a cause greater than yourself. This is about leaving behind something of value, a mark that says, I was here and I made a difference. Second, through love and relationships, by truly seeing and valuing another human being, by forming deep, authentic connections, and by experiencing the richness of life through the eyes of someone you cherish. In love, we not only recognize another's uniqueness, but also often discover our own. And the third way is through the attitude towards unavoidable suffering. When life gives you pain that cannot be escaped or changed, meaning can still be found in the way we choose to respond, with dignity, courage, and inner strength. He emphasized that suffering is unavoidable, but we can always have the freedom to respond. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment if it finds a meaning. After war, Frankl poured himself into his work, hoping that through his writings he might heal the inner emptiness many people felt. And in perhaps doing so, he can restore his own meaning of life. Live as if you were living already for the second time, and as if you had acted as wrongly the first time as you're about to act now. 2 years later, he married Eleanor, a nurse just like his first wife. He went on to establish Logotherapy, helping patients resolve emotional conflicts by finding purpose, taking responsibility, and making meaningful choices. As each situation in life represents a challenge to man and presents a problem for him to solve, the question of meaning of life may actually be reversed. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Once, when Frankl asked one of his students to sum up the meaning of his own life, the student guessed, "The meaning of your life is to help others find meaning of theirs." Frankl was surprised and said, "That was it. Exactly. Those are the very words I had thought." So when life feels unbearable, we don't need grand answers. We can simply ask ourselves, what gives my life meaning today? The story reminds us that the answer is always waiting inside us, if we are willing to look. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to our channel for more such stories from all across the world. Because with every ear that listens, a tale lives on.